The night was darker than usual, as if the moon had chosen to hide its face. Harsh Thakur, a wealthy businessman known for his cold, calculating nature, drove down an isolated highway with his family. Beside him sat his wife, Mira, whose soft demeanor often served as a contrast to his rigid personality. In the back seat were their two children, Aryan, a tech-savvy college student, and Tisha, a free-spirited teenager. They were en route to a remote hill station for a vacation, a rare attempt by Harsh to bond with his family. The air in the car was tense, years of neglect and unspoken grievances weighed heavily on them. Harsh's insistence on reaching their destination by nightfall, despite warnings of fog and treacherous roads, only added to the unease. As they approached a dense forest, the car's headlights began to flicker. Aryan noticed a faint silhouette by the roadside, a woman in tattered white clothes, staring at them with hollow eyes. He shuddered but said nothing, assuming it was a trick of the mist. The car suddenly sputtered to a stop. Harsh cursed under his breath and stepped out to inspect the engine. The silence of the forest was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. "Did you see that woman back there?" Aryan finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What woman?" Mira asked, turning to look out the window. Before Aryan could answer, Harsh returned, his face grim. "The car won't start. We'll have to find shelter for the night." They spotted a narrow path leading into the forest, where an old, decrepit mansion loomed in the distance. Reluctantly, they decided to seek help there. The mansion was eerily silent, its windows like dark eyes watching their every move. A rusted sign near the gate read Rudra Villa. Tisha clung to her mother as they entered, the creaking door echoing ominously. Inside, the air was damp and heavy, carrying the scent of decay. The furniture was covered in dust, and cobwebs draped the corners like forgotten memories. They found an old man sitting by a fireplace, his face weathered and eyes distant. "Travelers, are you?" he rasped, his voice barely audible. "This place is cursed. Stay the night if you must, but leave before dawn." Despite the warning, Harsh insisted they stay. They settled into the dusty rooms, each family member feeling an inexplicable sense of dread. That night, Aryan woke to the sound of whispers. He followed the voice to the hallway, where he saw the same woman he had noticed earlier. She stood at the end of the corridor, her back turned. "Who are you?" he called out. She turned slowly, her face pale and eyes empty. Before he could react, she vanished. Meanwhile, Mira dreamt of a young girl calling out for help. The dream felt so real that she woke up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding. Tisha found herself drawn to an antique mirror in her room. When she looked into it, her reflection smiled back, but her own face remained stoic. Harsh, the skeptic, dismissed their experiences as hallucinations, blaming the mansion's eerie atmosphere. But deep down, even he couldn't ignore the growing tension. The next morning, Aryan discovered old newspapers in the library. They chronicled a tragedy from decades ago. The Rudra family, once the owners of the mansion, had been brutally murdered by their trusted servant over a property dispute. The servant, however, was never found. As Aryan read aloud, the room grew colder. The family's name seemed to trigger something within the mansion. Doors slammed shut, and the whispers turned into anguished cries. The old man appeared again, his face grave. "You should not have stayed," he said. "The spirits here are restless. They seek justice." Harsh dismissed the warnings and demanded they leave immediately. But when they returned to the car, it still wouldn't start. As night fell, the hauntings escalated. Mira was lured into the basement by the sound of a child crying. There, she found an old toy chest filled with blood-stained clothes. Aryan was locked in the library, where books flew off the shelves, forming words, "Help us." Tisha, meanwhile, was drawn to the mirror again. This time, her reflection whispered, "You're one of us now." Harsh, determined to escape, stormed through the mansion, only to find himself trapped in a room with the woman in white. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded. She pointed to a portrait on the wall. It was of Harsh's father, younger but unmistakable. "Your family wronged us," she hissed. "This mansion was stolen, and blood was spilled to keep it." The truth hit Harsh like a blow. His father had acquired the property through deceit, leading to the Rudra family's downfall. Realizing they had to make amends, Harsh gathered his family. Together, they performed a ritual to honor the dead, guided by the old man, who revealed himself as the last surviving member of the Rudra family. As the ritual ended, the spirits began to fade, their anguished cries replaced by a serene silence. The woman in white appeared one last time, her face now peaceful. "You have set us free," she said before vanishing. The next morning, the car started without issue. As they drove away, the family felt a renewed sense of unity. Harsh, once cold and distant, vowed to change. But as they glanced back at the mansion, it was gone, leaving only an empty clearing in the forest. The Thakur family never spoke of the mansion again, but they knew they had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. And though they left the shadows behind, the lessons they learned would remain with them forever. In a quiet, sun-drenched suburban neighborhood, the Wilkerson family moved into a large, Victorian-style house that had stood untouched for decades. It was the kind of place that seemed to breathe history, its creaking floors and peeling wallpaper whispering tales of the past. For young Ethan Wilkerson, a precocious 10-year-old with a vivid imagination, the house was a treasure trove of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. But it wasn't long before the house began to reveal its secrets. Ethan first heard it late one night while tucked into his bed. A faint, almost imperceptible voice echoed from behind the wall near his headboard. "Help me," the voice whispered, barely audible yet chilling enough to send shivers down Ethan's spine. He shot upright, scanning the room for the source. Nothing. Just the steady hum of the radiator and the shadows cast by the moonlight. Ethan told himself it was just his imagination and buried his face under the covers. But the voice came again the next night, and the night after that. Curiosity eventually won out over fear. During the day, Ethan tapped along the wall where he thought the voice came from, searching for a hollow spot. To his surprise, he found one. The wallpaper there was slightly different, as if someone had patched over something. That night, when the whispering returned, Ethan decided to respond. "Who are you?" he asked in a hushed tone. There was a long pause before the voice answered. "My name is Lila. I'm trapped." "Trapped?" Ethan's heart pounded. "In the wall?" "Yes." Ethan couldn't understand how that was possible, but Lila's voice sounded real, and terrified. He promised to help her, though he had no idea how. Over the next few days, Ethan started gathering tools. Armed with a flashlight and a small crowbar he'd found in the garage, he began peeling away the wallpaper and prying at the wooden slats beneath. Each pull revealed layers of decay, old insulation, crumbling plaster, and finally, a small, hidden compartment. Inside was not a person but a collection of faded drawings and a single, haunting photograph of a young girl with wide, frightened eyes. The back of the photo read, "Lila, 1963. Ethan's parents were furious when they discovered the damage. They dismissed his stories of a voice in the wall as overactive imagination and grounded him for the rest of the month. But Ethan knew what he had heard, and he knew Lila was real. The more Ethan tried to uncover the truth about Lila, the stranger the house became. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and doors that were closed would be found ajar. Ethan began to feel like he was being watched. One night, he asked Lila, "Why are you trapped?" Her reply sent chills down his spine. "He won't let me leave." "Who?" "The man who built this house. He's still here. Watching. Waiting." Ethan's blood ran cold. He started seeing fleeting glimpses of a tall, shadowy figure in the corners of rooms and hearing heavy footsteps in the hallways when no one else was home. Ethan spent hours at the local library, digging through old records and newspaper clippings. He discovered that the house had been owned by a man named Richard Grayson, an eccentric architect who had designed the home in the late 1950s. Rumors swirled about Grayson's strange habits and his obsession with the occult. One article mentioned the mysterious disappearance of a young girl named Lila who had lived in the neighborhood. She had last been seen playing near the Grayson house. Ethan realized the horrifying truth: Lila hadn't just disappeared, she had been taken. That night, Ethan confronted the voice in the wall. "Lila, what happened to you?" Before she could answer, the temperature in the room plummeted, and the shadowy figure emerged, more solid and menacing than ever. It was Richard Grayson, or what was left of him. "You shouldn't have meddled," the figure growled, its voice deep and unnatural. Ethan backed away, but the shadow advanced, filling the room with darkness. Just as the figure reached for him, a blinding light erupted from the wall. Lila's voice rang out, stronger than ever. "Leave him alone." The figure recoiled, writhing in agony as the light consumed it. The room fell silent, and the oppressive presence vanished. The next morning, Ethan found the wall where Lila's voice had come from completely intact, as if he had never touched it. But the photo of Lila was gone, and in its place was a single daisy, fresh and dewy. Ethan knew she was finally free. From that day on, the house felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. The whispers were gone, and the shadows no longer lingered. But Ethan would never forget the girl in the wall, and the courage it took to set her free.